Unclassified documents have just been released revealing that the NSA is buying your internet history. Also coming up in today's hacking news, the Russians hacked the emails of Microsoft executives and Ukraine takes out a Russian research center. But first, the fact the NSA collects massive amounts of data isn't news at all, but did you know they're buying your data as well? We are of course talking about metadata, or to be more precise, NetFlow data. NetFlow is a protocol developed by Cisco that collects IP addresses, MAC addresses, timestamps, so more than enough information to piece together your browsing habits. And as you browse the web, this data is frequently collected by ISPs who often then sell it on to data brokers. Now these are the guys accused of aggregating data from various sources before packaging it up and selling it to the NSA. However, up until now, this sale of NetFlow data to the NSA has existed in a legal grey area. After all, you probably agreed to the terms and conditions that permitted the sale of your data to third parties. But regardless of whether you ticked that box, the sale of this data is probably illegal, or at least the US Senator from Oregon who blew the lid on this seems to think so. The key thing here is that under normal circumstances, if law enforcement wants to obtain your search history from, say, Google, they'd need a warrant. But in this case, the NSA is seeking no such warrants and rather just buying their way into vast troves of data. And the NSA did not want this information to get out. They've been fighting this particular senator for 3 years and only agreed to release this information after he started playing hardball and blocked the nomination of the new NSA director until they agreed to his demand of releasing the files. What happens now remains to be seen. The senator behind these revelations has published an open letter to the Director of National Intelligence, kindly asking that the NSA stops buying your data. The only good news coming from the unclassified files is that this only seems to affect US domestic internet traffic. However, the obvious question here is that if the NSA is buying, which company exactly is selling? Well, we just don't know. The data brokerage industry is notoriously shady. A lot of these companies operate completely in the dark. However, data brokers often hold way more data than just your internet history, and as a matter of fact, that's something today's sponsor can help you do something about. This video is sponsored by DeleteMe. These guys help you take control of your personal data, which you might not know is being held by data brokers. Data brokers spend their time scraping the web for your data, building a profile on you that might contain your name, address, phone number, and a hell of a lot more. Then they sell that information to, well, you don't know. Quite often it could be some rando who's willing to stump up a couple dollars for a person search. But the thing that really scares me about data brokers is just how often they're used to enable SIM swapping and doxing. But there is a solution. I've personally been using DeleteMe, and it works like this. You provide your data to DeleteMe, after all they need to know what they're looking for, then they'll check hundreds of data brokers for your data, and within just 7 days compile a personalized report on what they found. And whilst I like to think I'm somewhat privacy conscious and careful about who I give my data to, DeleteMe found 6 data brokers had built a profile on me and I had no idea. But luckily I can sit back and relax because DeleteMe will auto-magically send removal requests on my behalf, and so long as I keep my subscription, these guys will continually scour the web for my info. It's such an essential service, and to sweeten the deal, if you use the link below you'll get 20% off your subscription. Embarrassing news coming from Microsoft. They've just admitted to being hacked by the Russians. The news was broken when Microsoft filed an 8K form with the SEC. This is the form that American companies are required by law to file when they fall victim to a serious cyber attack, in order to give shareholders a heads up. Microsoft said the intrusion began in November of 2023, when state-backed hackers launched a password spray attack. This kind of attack works by first creating a list of target accounts, then the attacker will try to log into them one at a time with the same basic password, before moving on to the next password on the list. This helps to avoid lockouts that you might get by repeatedly trying to log into the same account over and over. However, as you can imagine, this method is incredibly slow. But if the attacker is patient enough, they might just get lucky and strike gold, which is exactly what happened here. The bad guys gained access to what Microsoft is calling a legacy non-production test tenant account, essentially an old account that was only created for testing purposes, possibly created by an engineer in a rush using a basic password. After being used for testing, the account wasn't deleted, but rather forgotten about, until Russian state hackers gained access to it. And the fact the account was even accessible through such a basic attack implies there was no two-factor authentication in sight, so I guess Microsoft failed to follow their own advice. Unluckily for Microsoft, and really quite surprisingly, for some reason the account in question had a very high level of permissions, which gave the hackers access to a very small percentage of Microsoft corporate email accounts. A very small percentage might not seem too bad, except that small percentage included Microsoft's senior leadership team. Essentially, the emails of Microsoft executives are now in the hands of Midnight Blizzard. That's the name of the Russian group behind the intrusion, or at least the name Microsoft calls them. Different researchers have all come up with their own names, so this group is also referred to as Cozy Bear, Nobelium, and there's quite a few others. According to Microsoft's investigation, the attackers were after information related to Midnight Blizzard itself, so I guess the Russians were most interested in finding out just how much Microsoft knows about them and how they operate. After all, Microsoft has published a lot of research on Midnight Blizzard, so they'll be very familiar with how the group operates. If the Russians can find out just how much Microsoft knows about their tactics, it might help them avoid detection in future operations. Ukraine claims to have carried out a devastating cyber attack on a scientific research center in Russia. On paper, the facility is just a meteorological research center which receives live data from dozens of satellites, but Ukraine claims the facility does far more than just predicts the weather. It's one of 3 facilities that's alleged to be providing satellite data to Russia's Ministry of Defense, amongst other non-weather related government departments. The facilities are strategically placed throughout Russia, with the Ukrainians targeting the one in the east. The attack is said to have been perpetrated by a group of hacktivists that go by the name BO Team. A very unfortunate name, though I'm assuming BO has some kind of a different meaning in Ukrainian. Ukraine's Ministry of Defense posted photos that seem to come from hacked CCTV cameras. Cray is a brand of supercomputer often used in meteorological analysis, with this model apparently costing $350,000. But Ukraine claims that after the hack, it's been paralyzed and cannot be fully restored. Paralyzed isn't a very technical word, so what that means in reality isn't clear. However, Cray is an American brand owned by HP, and because of sanctions on Russia, Cray might not be able to legally help the Russians get it back up to speed if its software has been damaged in some way. In addition, screenshots released by the Ukrainian attackers show a before and after of the facility's storage management dashboard. 2 petabytes of data has apparently been deleted. Amongst the Ukrainians' other claims are that 280 other servers were disrupted, the value of data destroyed was apparently $10 million, and the facility's air conditioning and humidification systems were damaged, and also that some kind of a research station in Russia's Arctic North has apparently been disconnected. It's important to note, however, all these claims are coming directly from Ukraine's Ministry of Defense, so they should all be taken with the pinchiest of salt pinches. I mean, the press release does read a bit propagandary. However, there's been no comment at all from the Russian side on this. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Have a good one.